In this video here, we're going to take a look at critical activities. Now, another important skill for critical path analysis is being able to identify critical activities. So an activity is described as a critical activity if any increase in its duration results in a corresponding increase for the duration of the whole project. And a path from the source node to the sink node, which entirely follows critical activities, is what we call a critical path. And a critical path is the longest path contained in the network. And at each node here, or vertex, whichever you prefer to call that, on a critical path, the early event time is equal to the late event time. So before we work through a practice question together here, there's a couple of extra things that we need to know. So for the first point here then, an activity connecting two critical events isn't necessarily a critical activity. So an important point to be aware of there. And then finally, for the very last point here, it is possible for a project to have more than one critical path. And in which case here, the total project time is the same on each one. And I'm hoping that it's quite intuitive, right? So there shouldn't be a difference then in the total project time, right? For different critical paths, okay? So with all that in mind then, let's just work through a practice question together. So let's just get started here then with this practice question. So for this question, what we're told here is the activity network for a project is given below, as we can see then from our diagram. We're then told that the number in brackets gives the time in days to complete each activity. What we're also told here as well is that the early and late event times have been completed for us, which we can see anyway from our diagram. So for this question then, all we want to do here is just simply state the critical activities. Now, there's two ways to go about this here. The first way to do this would just be by inspection, and that's fine. A more formal way to do this here is to find the total float for each individual activity. If the total float is 0, then we have found a critical activity. Now, this video here is supposed to come before the total float of an activity. So technically, this would be using a resource or a method that you're not familiar with here. So what I would recommend here at this point is go forward, watch the next video on the total float of an activity, and then come back to this practice question. I know that seems a little bit counterintuitive, but the way that I normally teach these two topics here is simultaneously, so at the same time, rather than teaching it separately as if they're two separate things. They kind of go hand in hand. So yeah, just so you're aware here, okay? So, like I said then, all I want to do here is just find the total float of each individual activity. So let me just quickly make 2 points here before I do anything else. So, like we said before then, if we have a critical activity, then the total float here is equal to 0. So the total float is equal to 0. And then for the second point here, how do we actually find the total float of an activity? So the total float here, is equal to the late event time. So I'll abbreviate this here to LET, late event time, minus the duration. So minus duration, minus the early event time. And again, I'll abbreviate this here to EET. Okay? So let me just change my pen color here. Let's just do this we'll do it in red here. So let's just find then the total float here for each individual activity. What we're looking for then is any activities that have a total float of 0, right? If they have a total float of 0, then the activity is a critical activity, right? So starting off then, we have activity A here. So the late event time is 8, the duration is 4, and the early event time is 0. So I do 8 minus 4 minus 0. And in that case then, activity A here has a float of 4. I'm going to put 4 here in square brackets underneath, okay? So the value here inside the square bracket then, that just represents the total float of that activity, okay? What about activity B then? So the late event time is 7, the duration is 7, and the early event time is 0. So I do 7 minus 0. And that gives us a total float here of 0, okay? So the total float is 0. So what that means here then is activity B is a critical activity, okay? I'm just going to highlight activity B here then, just so we're aware. Activity B then is a critical activity. What about activity C then? So the late event time here is 12, the duration is 4, and the early event time is 7. So I do 12 minus 4, which is 8, minus 7, and that gives us a total float of 1 there. Okay, let's just keep going. What about activity D here? So my late event time is 12, minus the duration, which is 5, so I get 7, minus the early event time of 7. That gives us a total float of 0. And again, what I found here is a critical activity. So activity D is also a critical activity. Let's just keep going here. So now the next activity here is activity E. So my late event time is 12, minus the duration, which is 2, that gives me 10, minus the early event time, which is 7. So 12 minus 2 is 10, 10 minus 7, that gives us 3 there. Okay, so the total float for activity E is 3 there. Okay, let's just keep going then. So F here. So I do 16 minus 5 minus 7. So 16 minus 5 is 11, minus 7, that gives us 4. What about activity G here? So we do 16 minus 4, which is 12, minus 7, and that gives us a total float of 5 there. Let's just keep going here. So we've got activity H here. So I do 16 minus 4, which is 12, minus 12 here, and that gives us 0. Okay, let's do that underneath here. So we've got a total float of 0. So what that means here then is activity H is a critical activity. So we're nearly there now, just a few more to go here. So for activity I then, I've got 16 minus 3, which is 13, minus 12, and that gives us a total float of 1. So what about activity J now? So the late event time here is 22, minus the duration, which is 10, that gives me 12, minus the early event time of 12. So in that case then, I get a total float here of 0. And we found another critical activity. Okay, so we'll just highlight that as well. Activity K now, so I do 22 minus 5, which is 17, minus 16, and that gives us a total float of 1. And then finally, just this final activity here, activity L, I do 22 minus 6, which is 16, minus the early event time of 16, and we get a total float of 0. And again, we found another critical activity. So to finish with here then, let's just quickly state the critical activities. So therefore, the critical activities here, so the critical activities are, so what did we find here then? So activity B, we had B, we had D, we had H, we had H, we had J, and then finally we also had activity L there. Okay, like so. And there we have it then. So what we found there is the critical activities, and that gives us the solution to the one practice question for this video here. And that brings us to the end then of this video here on critical activities.